Okay, hello everybody. Thank you because you accepted to be here for this conference. We are very happy and very honored to have a very special guest after the visit and conference of Professor de Soto almost 1 year ago. Another important representative of the Austrian School of Economics, Professor Philipp Bagus, is here in Romania. Today at Romanian-American University with you guys, and very soon in Iași, University Alexandru. At the same time, it was a surprise even for us to see this book, The Tragedy of Euro. Of course, it's in Romanian, Tragedia Monedei Euro. We are really surprised about this thing, and we congratulate our colleagues from University Alexandru in Iași. But probably a little more about this will tell you Professor Bagus. We'll try to stay in touch with some other representatives of the Austrian School of Economics, and as Bogdan, Alex, and the other Bogdan there promise you, we'll try to invite at least one important person per year. Yeah, Bogdan, or more than this. Yeah, we'll try to do the best in this field. Okay, Professor Bagus, you have the floor, please. I think it's okay. It's not correct. You can try to fix it.
But I can
start and
I can do it.
yes.
So, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure and honor for me to be here. Until yesterday, or until this morning, I was in Iași at the university where they had translated the book, and yesterday night they did a huge Romanian dinner. So it was until 1 o'clock in the morning. I had to get up at 4 to get the play. So excuse me for not being as dynamic and enthusiastic as I should be, but I will try my best. And sitting it comes well also. So let me talk about my book, The Tragedy of the Euro. I try to combine Austrian libertarian analysis of the political history of the euro with Austrian monetary theory to understand the euro. So the unique part of the book is to try to combine this. It's kind of naive to think that the euro has been introduced to lower transaction costs or to eliminate competitive devaluations. If you look at the history of the euro, otherwise you might think, well, it has been the ideal project of imposing the discipline of the Bundesbank on the rest, even though it's the other way around. So I use as a background to my analysis the classical fight between the two ideas of liberty and coercion, classical libertarianism and socialism. And also for Europe, there are these two visions, the classical liberal one and the socialist one. The founders of the European Union or community, Robert Schuman, Konrad Adenauer, and Alcide de Gasperi, that all, by the way, were Catholics and German. They spoke German with each other. They were still closer to this classical liberal version. They were still influenced by the Second World War, by the destruction of the war, and they knew, or they thought that peace would be promoted by free trade. For this vision, for the libertarian vision for Europe, the most fundamental Christian and European value is individual liberty. There are sovereign states that defend private property, open borders, and the free exchange of goods, services, capital, and ideas. And the Treaty of Rome in 1957 was, in a way, a success of this vision, because it guaranteed the four liberties: free movement of goods, services, capital, and people. Even though, even from the beginning, there were also some problems. For example, the common agricultural policy, the central planning in agriculture, that was also in the treaty introduced by French pressure. Well, this vision wants to bring back what classical liberalism had achieved in the 19th century, and then was lost in the age of nationalism and socialism and two world wars. So this vision, the only thing we need for harmonic cooperation and prosperity in Europe is liberty. For this vision, we don't need a European super state. In fact, this vision is opposed to a central European state, which is seen as a danger to individual liberty. The only central institution that you could need with this vision is a central European court that defends the four liberties and solves conflicts between the nations. On the other hand, we have the socialist vision for Europe, or also called the empire vision. The most prominent defenders of this vision are politicians like Jacques Delors or François Mitterrand. And this vision is backed by a collision of nationalists, socialists, social conservatives, or almost all parties. They want Europe to be an empire, interventionistic to the inside and protectionist to the outside. It's the statist dream of a central European state directed by technocrats. Of course, these technocrats in their dreams imagine themselves as being these leaders. Then there's a conflict between the empire rules over the periphery. The sovereign states stop to exist. There's central legislation. There's redistribution between the states, the member states, regulation and harmonization of taxes on the highest level, of course. And the vast majority of the political class, the bureaucrats, the lobbies and the subsidized sectors, they are actually in favor of the centralization because they want to use the central state to achieve their ends, to enrich themselves. The empire vision is nothing new in history. Already Charles the Great, Napoleon, Hitler and Stalin, they all wanted to introduce a central European state, a central government in Europe via military means. Now the socialist vision employs more civil, less violent means, political means. And one of the tactics to achieve this, to use economic crisis, as Robert Hicks shows very well in his book, to use economic crisis, to crisis situations, to introduce new central institutions and increase the power of already existing central institutions. We can see it perfectly in this crisis now, that the EU Commission behaves already as if Greece and Ireland would be their protectorate. Supposedly they are protecting these countries against the evil speculators that want to bring down Europe. And they tell them how to reduce the deficits. So they have expanded the power. The ECB has expanded its power. It has started to buy outright government bonds, has increased its balance sheet. And also new institutions are introduced, like the EFSF, the European Financial Stability Facility. And later on, they want to make it permanent in the European Stabilization Mechanism. So this eternal fight between liberty and coercion, or the classical liberal view and the socialist view, went on also up in the European Union. Obviously there's a conflict because more powerful central state means less liberty for the individuals. So now the question is, who was traditionally on which side of this fight? Well, traditionally the Christian democratic parties were more on the classical liberal side. Also states like Great Britain, Margaret Thatcher, the Netherlands, or also Germany, Ludwig Erhard, they were more on this side, while social democrats, socialists of all parties, under the leadership of the French political elite, were on the socialist side. Here France is key. After the humiliation of 1940 and the loss of their colonies, the French political elite was looking for a substitute for its lost empire, and it looked for it in Europe. The French political elite also wanted to prevent that Germany would recuperate its natural weight in the center of Europe and recuperate its lost territory. So the idea was to absorb Germany in a socialist European Union under the leadership of France. So this fight between the two sides went on, and it looked like in the socialist side would win. Slowly, the power of the EU was increasing. The EU budget it increased. There were ever more regulations and harmonizations. There's an implicit tendency for centralization because any bureaucracy has a tendency to grow. It wants to increase its power. Also, the European one that does not have much control neither. There's also a tendency for centralization because the EU Commission has the right to initiative of new legislation. So it seemed that the socialists were winning, but then one unexpected event happened. That Ludwig Mises had predicted 70 years ago that communism collapsed, the Berlin Wall came down. And this changed the picture completely. Because what did it mean for the fight in Europe between the two visions? Remember that Germany was more on the classical liberal side. After reunification, Germany obviously would win in power. And of course the states of the East, or Central Europe, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Hungary, Poland, they wanted to join, and of course they had enough, as you guys know, of centralization, empires, and socialism. So they would obviously join the classical liberal side. So the balance of power was to tip against the socialists. What was the reaction of them? Well, they accelerated and intensified their efforts. First, to prevent the fast extension of the EU eastwards, because they feared that then the EU would degenerate into a free trade zone. I say degenerate because they saw it this way. For example, Great Britain, they wanted a fast extension of the European Union because they actually wanted Thatcher had this aim in mind. And they intensified their efforts towards centralization. And what was their means to achieve this centralization was the single currency, the euro. Well, the fall of the Berlin Wall presented unique possibilities to the French political class. French political class wanted to get rid of the discipline of the Bundesbank, the German central bank. And there was a saying that the most dreaded institution in Europe after the end of the Wehrmacht was the Bundesbank. Why? Because when the Bundesbank raised interest rates, the Bank of France had to raise interest rates also. Otherwise, the French had to devalue their currency. And the devaluation would be a clear sign for the population of inflation. So it would be very embarrassing to do that. So they had to have the interest rates higher than they wanted. And what did that mean? But higher interest rates means less monetary expansion. And this means less monetization of the deficit. And a lower deficit means less government spending. So the Bundesbank, by its relatively restrictive monetary policy, was indirectly restricting French government spending because they had to have higher interest rates and less monetization of their spending. So the rules of the war were actually limiting the public, the government spending of the country on the winning side. The Bundesbank was less inflationary than other central banks because of the too hyperinflation that Germans had suffered in this 20th century. Of course, also German politicians wanted were not very happy with the Bundesbank, but they couldn't really touch its independence because the Bundesbank had a very strong support and still has in the population. Any politician, German politician who wanted to touch the independence or influence its policies would lose elections. And this was caused, of course, by the too hyperinflation that made Germans very adverse to inflation. So the Bundesbank was a limit for French inflation and French government spending. That the French political elite really didn't like very much. So there's one episode, one anecdote at the end of the 80s where French and German diplomats come together and the Germans want to talk about the topic about short-range nuclear weapons that has been stationed, they had been stationed near the German border that could only explode in Germany. They said, well, this is this is for us is an awkward situation. Can we do something about this nuclear bombs near our border? And then the French responded, well, let's first talk about the German atomic bomb. You know, they answered, well, you know that we surprised and naive. You know that we don't have an atomic bomb, and we are not allowed to have one. And then the French answered, well, you mean, of course, the destined, the Deutsche one. So you see that it was a symbol of German power that they wanted to get rid of. And the fall of the Berlin Wall presented a unique possibility. Because as now it's already a fact, it was in last September the archives were opened. François Mitterrand demanded, in exchange for his yes to German reunification, he demanded the single currency, the euro. Why was he in the position to demand this? Well, the situation was still that Germany was still occupied by the four allies at this time. It was, of course, militarily vastly inferior to France. So Mitterrand used this situation and he actually threatened by saying, if we don't step forward now with European integration, well, meaning the euro, we will have a situation like in 1913, so 1 year before the First World War. Well, this meant the end of the D-Mark, which was an important victory for the socialist vision for Europe, because as we will see, the setup of the euro provokes sovereign debt crisis that can then be used for centralization of political and fiscal power. The end of the euro would be for some time be the end for the socialist vision, and that is why they really defended the euro to the bitter end. To analyze a little bit more the interests behind introduction of the euro, or the winners and the losers, I analyze why did southern peripheral countries wanted the euro. But the first point I already explained, they want to get rid of the discipline of the Bundesbank with more restrictive monetary policy. They would also try to receive the prestige of the Bundesbank for their own currencies by putting it, for example, in Frankfurt, and therefore have a stronger currency than otherwise and have more imports or cheaper imports and happier population. Then there's the point of seigniorage. Seigniorage is the profit, or the profit from central bank money production. This is a curious point because the ECB receives the revenues of all national central banks and pools them. Obviously, if a central bank has more assets, it receives more income, more interest, more loans, more assets, it receives more interest and puts more money into the pool. How is the money distributed from this pool? Well, obviously not in function of the assets that the national central banks contribute, because otherwise they would get the same back as they put in. Now it's distributed by a number calculated by GDP and population. So there's a redistribution going on. And Germany is losing in this redistribution, Spain also, and France is no surprise winning in this redistribution. Well, then the lower interest rates for government debts. The euro came with an implicit guarantee and backing of the government debts of the peripheral countries, because there's no way, no exit in the Maastricht Treaty. And we see it already that this implicit guarantee is getting ever more explicit. So this meant that the risk premium for peripheral government bonds would fall. That meant lower interest rates for peripheral government bonds, and they could have higher debts and deficits than otherwise with higher interest rates. And not only the risk premium went down, but also the inflation premium, because there was an expectation that the new ECB would be less inflationary than the old national central banks. Then it was a political excuse for austerity measures. Maybe the same happens now in Romania. Politicians could say, well, we have to get into the euro, which is wonderful, therefore we have to reduce government spending, we have to privatize. So you could sell this austerity measures better to your population than otherwise. And these measures were measures that would have been necessary in any case for some countries that were already on the verge of bankruptcy in the early 90s. Well, then is another point, monetary redistribution. That money production flew mostly in the peripheral countries. And then the point again of the stronger currency, which allows you a higher standard of living than otherwise. Before the euro, Germany, because it would have less inflation and hard-working population, capital accumulation, productivity increases, the D-mark would appreciate, rise in value, and this would be a social dividend for the general German population that could import more cheaply, or go on vacation more cheaply, or also companies could import raw materials cheaper, and so on. But this benefits of hard work, productivity, capital accumulation is now spread not only to Germany but also to the other countries that have a single currency. That is, the benefits are spread to the south. The south has a stronger currency than they otherwise would have had. We have cheaper imports, and this coupled with lower interest rates led to impressive consumption and construction boom. So this is to explain the interest that the high inflation of peripheral countries had. So the euro, these are the graphs to back this up with data. Here you see the interest rates of Germany and the peripheral countries, and you see that even before the introduction of the euro, when it becomes clear who will join the club, interest rates are converging to the German level. You see that in 98 there's still a gap with the Greek one, because Greece only falsifies their statistics later to join in 2001, so it was not clear yet in 98 that they would join, that is the gap. Here you see the export surplus of Germany. And this is the result of the productivity that would lead to a tendency for a stronger currency that is compensated by the import surpluses of club net southern countries. And this here you see it in here you see it in the last 15 years. You see this has actually increased. Here you see how productivity evolved, or competitiveness. This is unit labor cost. So the higher this is, the less productive you are. And you can see that the euro has been used by southern countries to reduce their productivity. They have increased their wages. While on the contrary, in Germany, wages have relatively fallen, and productivity, competitiveness has increased. Right? The green line is the German one. It has decreased considerably in the last 15 years. Here you see that the standard of living in Germany stagnated. If you measure it with consumption, here there are the retail sales of the last 15 years. You see in Germany the blue line stagnates, no increase in standard of living, while in other countries there's the US as a comparison of the UK and France. It increased, so there was more consumption. Here you have this comparison with Spain, incredible increase in retail sales in only 7 years of 20%, and then of course it collapses after the crisis hits. So there you see how the general population profits or loses from the euro. Here you have the increase in M3 beginning with the introduction of the euro, and you see that the money supply increases faster in the periphery than in Germany. The German line is big with a thick blue line. It tends to be at the bottom. Especially the Spanish line is increasing very much. Also the Greece one, the Italian. So this explains obviously why it was beneficial for southern countries to join the euro, but then the question is why did Germany have so many disadvantages? Why did they join the euro? So we have to explain why Germany least wanted the euro. The general population, many economists and lawyers were against it. So why did they introduce it? So the first point I already explained, that Mitterrand demanded the euro in exchange for the permission for reunification. But there are other points. Of course, the German elite also wanted to get rid of the Bundesbank, and therefore, finally, and this was a nice way to do it, then there are, of course, also interest groups that were in favor of the socialist distribution to go on. Politicians were in favor of it because they wanted harmonization of tax rates. Interest groups wanted harmonization of regulations that were strongest in Germany, for example, labor standards or environmental regulation, and they wanted to impose it on the other countries to have an advantage. Get an advantage there. Also, big exporters were in favor of the euro. They still are, because they fear competitive devaluation. Before the euro, there was also a strong pressure to innovate and the demand to appreciate. So they would be in favor. But we have to be careful there, because I always hear the argument how often that Germany is a great benefits so much from the euro because of the export. If we go back to an individual person, what is really interesting are not the exports, but obviously the imports. Like when I'm exporting, I'm selling my labor, I'm working, or I'm selling my computer, or I'm selling my clothes, then I'm exporting. When I'm importing, I'm buying cars, I'm buying vacation, and so on. So obviously it's nicer only to import more than to export. You don't have to pay. So if you would ask me, do you want only to import or only to export? Well, I say, okay, I stop working. I only want to import. So this is actually what the southern countries did, as you have seen in the graphs. So I think it's funny to say that this would be an advantage for Germany. And lastly, the political elite, German elite, also wanted to prevent a sovereign and financial collapse. In the beginning of the 1990s, some countries were already close to a sovereign debt crisis, like Belgium or Italy. And by merging in the euro, the interest rates came down and they could reduce the debt. And so a sovereign debt crisis would be prevented. The sovereign debt crisis would have led to tumult in the financial markets. There might have been bankrupt, there would have been losses for Italian, Belgian banks, and then also for German banks. So this is the reason why German banks also were in favor of the euro, and why German political elite also wanted to prevent such a collapse of the financial system and of other governments. Good. So these are the reasons why the advantages for the German political class. So this was the political analysis of the interests behind the euro. So let's now go to the monetary side. How do governments finance their deficits in the euro system? When governments spend more than they receive in taxes, what they usually do is they print paper, or issue electronically in form of government bonds. Then a large part of the bonds are bought by the banking system, and the banking system buys these bonds to a large extent because they can use these bonds to go to the ECB, pledge them as collateral, and receive new reserves, receive new loans backed by this bond. And against these new reserves, the banking system can engage in the very profitable business of credit expansion. The money supply increases. So there's actually no really a need for the ECB to buy these bonds. It just accepts them as collateral, and as long as the loans are renewed, rolled over, the money supply keeps, or the increasing reserves remain intact. So obviously if they keep them rolling on forever, it's like buying the government bonds. So these bonds are never paid because when they come due, the government just issue new bonds. Well, you can say, well, but then the government at least loses the interest rate. Well, this is not really true either, because the government pays the banking system the interest on the bonds. The banking system pays the interest on the loans from the ECB, and then the ECB has profit, and the profits are remitted back to the government. So it's not really a deficit that hurts very much the government. Well, this implies an incentive to incur in deficit. Well, some data. The banks hold, well, in March 2011 it was 2 trillion euros of government debt they own. And that is like they almost hold, and this has increased of course from March. They hold like 30% of all government debt are held by banks. So the question is who holds the rest? Well, besides this more direct monetization, there's also an indirect monetization going on. Recall. The government issues bonds and receives the money from the banking system. The banking system goes to the ECB and receives new reserves. So the banking system has now new reserves and can expand credits. So there's new money created, credit expansion. The banking system gives, for example, loans to a constructor. The constructor pays his factors of production, his workers, and so on. So the new money flows to the workers. What do the workers do? Well, they consume part of the higher income, part they invest in investment funds, pension funds, and insurances, and so on. And what do they do? Well, not only due to regulation, but also because it's a very liquid asset, they buy government bonds. So part is indirectly monetized through this. And they buy government bonds because it's the most liquid asset, and it's so liquid because banks can use them as collateral to get new reserves from the central bank, from the ECB. So this implicit subsidy explains why government bonds are so liquid and bought with the newly produced money by investors. Okay, so then there are incentives to run deficits. Bring government bonds and use them and the banks buy them and use them as collateral for new money, for loans from the ECB, and then increase the money supply by credit expansion. Then there's a redistribution, anti-wrong effect. The first receivers of the new money profit because they can buy it at old lower prices, and then the money spreads and prices increase. So of course this is true also for the Fed. The Fed for USA, for the United States, the Fed monetizes the debt, and then the population pays for the debt through higher prices. So the US population suffers through higher prices. They don't understand this mechanism so well as taxes. They say as suffering through taxes. So this is why governments prefer this way of financing expenditures. Well, but in the European Union, the monetary union, not only if I am a government and have a deficit, not only my population suffers through higher prices, but also the population in other countries that use the euro. So I can externalize the costs of my deficit on people living in other EMU countries using the single currency. And so therefore there's an incentive to have deficits, because I can externalize the costs on foreigners. And there's not only the incentive to have a deficit, also to have an incentive to have a higher deficit than other countries. Why is this? Imagine that Germany has a deficit of 3% of GDP, and the rest of the EU countries has a deficit of 10% of GDP. Banks buy these government bonds, and the money supply increases, and prices rise, let's say, 8% in the EMU, European Monetary Union. Then, Germany, even though it has a deficit, the German government spending might actually fall in real terms because prices increase. So you see that you can only benefit from your deficit, or you can benefit more if you have a higher deficit than the other governments. So the winner is the government with the highest deficits, and the losers are the people in countries with lower deficits. And I said I call this a tragedy of the commons, and therefore the title of the book, Tragedy of the Euro. Because obviously property rights are not defended in this area of public money. And I compare it with the printing press used by different owners. So several people have access to a printing press, so what is the incentive? Well, print as much money as you can before the others do, because you can externalize the costs of this action on all users of the currency you are printing in form of a loss of purchasing power. Governments with higher deficits gain on cost of governments with lower deficits. So the incentive is to print as much money as possible as fast as they can, because otherwise other governments will do so. So the obviously, while this analogy of the printing press is very easy to understand, there are some differences, because otherwise the euro would have disappeared. Governments obviously cannot print euros directly. The only thing that they can print is their government bonds that are then bought by the banking system and then pledged as collateral to the ECB. So there are two risks involved, obviously, two differences. First is you print your government bonds and no bank buys them at an acceptable price. And second, that the ECB does not accept them as collateral. Only if these two conditions are given, it works like printing press. No? So there are two risks that lead to a difference. However, these risks are reduced considerably by the fact that I explained before. And therefore the historical analysis is so important, is the fact that the euro is a political project. That means that governments would bail out other governments with problems. There was no exit clause in the Maastricht Treaty, and markets knew this implicit bailout guarantee. In fact, politicians now say so, that they will do anything to save euro, as they say it, and they will do anything. Obviously, they do already very much. They basically rob people by printing money. So they do this. The question is, will they do more? Will they kill people to save the euro and their dream of euro? So I think it's very ironic that they say you will do anything to save the euro. It's like a war rhetoric. No, it's like total war, and evil speculators that want to bring down the ideal of the central European state. And you can see that these risks have been reduced by the actions that have been undertaken. The ECB actually did things that other very drastic things. The ECB started to buy government bonds directly, even before they said we won't do that. So you can see how they accommodate this political project. And the ECB also started to accept government bonds that are rated as junk, even though they said there will be no special rules for countries. They accept Greek and Irish and Portuguese government bonds, even though they are rated as junk. Well, there was another limit for this tragedy of the commons of the euro. because people knew, of course, of the problems. That was the Stability and Growth Pact. It's like, you know, the tragedy of the commons. Governments often wants to limit it by regulation. Like in the ocean, that was public, and the fishes. The tragedy of the commons of the fishers that want to fish as much as possible, because otherwise other fishers will fish. So how will they reduce the incentives where they put quotas? So fisher A, you get so many tons of fish, you can fish in 1 year. Fisher B, also a quota. But they try to do the same with the euro, the exploitation of the purchasing power of the euro. And the quota was, of course, only governments were allowed to exploit this. The quota was 3% of GDP, the limit for the deficit. However, this limit proved to be a total failure because there were no automatic penalties. Governments will decide on themselves if they would have to pay a penalty or not. So and they obviously decided to. They were their own judges and sovereign, so they decided not to pay any penalty. So also France and Germany were higher than this limit from 2003 on. In fact, in 2010, all but 2 countries had a higher deficit than 3%, Finland and Luxembourg. So you see that all these limits are not working. And therefore the euro is self-destructing due to these incentives to have higher deficits than other countries. These incentives to have higher deficits obviously lead to an accumulation of debt that then lead to a sovereign debt crisis that can be then used for centralization. Well, let's talk a little bit on how the euro generates conflicts between otherwise peacefully cooperating nations. Bastiat said, supposed to say, if goods do not cross borders, armies will. It's one of the teachings of classical liberalism, that free trade leads to harmony and peace. Well, in the European Monetary Union, or in the EU, this free trade, you see this German card that changed against Peter Schiess from Greece. Monetary Union, these flows are disturbed not only by the redistribution of the cohesion or regional fund, but also through the monetary redistribution of the euro. Take the example of Greece. The Greek government runs deficit to maintain an economy growing that is not competitive. So the uncompetitiveness of Greece is a direct result of the deficit. There are too high wages, inflexible labor markets. So the result is real unemployment. How is this real unemployment alleviated? Well, pay unemployment deficits, take part of the unemployed to employ as a government service, and the rest you send into early pension plans. Of course, this costs you as a government much money, so you have a deficit. But as you can externalize the cost of it on all users of the euro, they could maintain it. So the Greeks could live beyond their means. To cover the deficit, they issued just bonds that were bought by the banks and used as collateral for loans from the ECB. The money supply increased and prices rose all over Europe. So there were a redistribution. The new money first went to the Greek government and the people who received money from them. So if a minister buys a Mercedes, the new money then flows to Germany. And as the prices are high and uncompetitive in Greece, the money stays there and its prices up there. The result is obviously also a trade deficit. And goods are exchanged for new euros, or that may or will be never paid back. This redistribution leads to conflicts. In the monetary distribution is not seen very much. However, you cannot maintain an uncompetitive economy forever, and this led then to the bailout of 2010 and 2011 of the Greek government. And these bailouts, of course, made the redistribution more visible and led to conflicts between nations. So the German media said, the Germans think the Greeks are lazy and liars. They don't want to pay for the Greek welfare state. The Greeks are also angry because they think Germany is imposing evil austerity measures on them, and they demand preparations for the Second World War. So there are conflicts arising in Europe because free trade is restricted by this incentive generated by the euro system, the setup of the euro. So to conclude, the euro is a political project. I used to think that it was introduced to lower transaction costs, or in the propaganda that they tell. Its result is that it leads to centralization. So we have there are basically three possibilities for the future. The first is you could reform the Stability and Growth Pact, for example, automatic penalties, lower the limit from 3% to 1 or 0. Of course, this would imply a very harsh reduction of the size of the state and of the government in many countries, structural reforms, privatizations, reform of the labor market. And it would have to be seen how the rules are really followed by the sovereign governments. So this would be a possibility that gets ever more unrealistic day by day that debts increase. The second possibility is that the eurozone splits. For example, Greece, because of the continuous riots, exits the eurozone in a suicidal move, or that Germany says enough is enough and exits the euro, even though the Germans are good subjects of the government, the banking system, so it doesn't seem very close, this scenario right now. The third possibility is, of course, that we go further to centralization, to transfer to fiscal union, to an economic and fiscal government, to euro bonds, ECB keeps buying government bonds. So once we have this economic government, then they probably will harmonize taxes to eliminate evil tax competition. And once they are harmonized, there's no way to opt out or exit high taxes, go into another country of the EMU. So then the direction of taxes will go up, and liberty will be the victim of the new central state in Europe. So, conclusion for you, think about joining the euro, the sinking ship of the euro. It has very high risks and costs. Not only the obvious bailouts, also that you would have to pay, like to richer Greeks, for example, that they have longer vacations. But also the monetary redistribution that is not seen so much. The risk of political conflicts and the risk of centralization, very high risk of centralization and loss of liberty. And if you don't join, if Romanians don't join the euro, maybe other countries will follow the example and not join it. And from then, there's not a big step either that some countries leave the euro in this project, denouncing it as evil. Like, as I said, I don't have much hope in my fellow Germans to do that, but maybe the Finns will start, and then maybe others will join the Dutch, and maybe at the end the Germans, and then the political project, the socialist vision for Europe will suffer sound defeat. So the future of Europe is also in your hands. And if you reject the euro and denounce it as evil, you might lead to a chain reaction that finally ends the project of the euro, and that would be a great victory for civilization, peace and harmony in Europe. So I trust in you. Thank you very much. Questions?
Okay. Do you have questions? Please.
I have one. Okay, you give us some advice about not joining euro, but if you take a look to Romania case, you will see that Romania is a very inflationary country. So, of course, euro has the same problem with our local currency. It's produced by somebody else in an infinite quantity. But if you take a look to the restrictions associated to the single currency, we can see that Romanian level is quite weaker than euro at this moment now. Because we should respect our deficit, we should respect our public debt, of course, without restrictions, without penalties. But we should do this. We should accomplish a lot of conditions that could be very, very useful for Romania. So from this point of view, I think that the advice could be also seen like this. And another it's not a question, maybe a comment about the other idea. A single currency is very needed for a single market, because the full four liberties are quite a little bit encouraged by using a single currency, not a lot of currencies produced by everybody. So we have an additional cost when we are using our local currency instead euro in the transactions with all other European countries. It's a barrier against these four liberties or four freedoms we discussed here. So why not joining such a project from these 2 points of view? Thank you.
Yeah, well, but I think the risks are very high. You give your faith into the hands of Trichet and Draghi. These people also, to maintain the euro, if they want to maintain it, will be has to be inflationary, will be inflationary. So you could say, well, Romania would be even more inflationary.
8%.
Could be. But of course it would be better to introduce a sound currency in Romania than to introduce the euro, to reform the Romanian currency, to back it by gold, for example, is a much better option than to join the euro project, because once you're in, you will suffer all the costs and risks. So, yeah, you have to, like joining a ship and you don't know where it will go, it will probably sink.
Or staying on our rack.
Yes, but you could improve your rack, right? You could improve it. Once you're on the big ship, you cannot improve it again. So easily. But I see your point, which is a good point. And the second one was transaction costs are lower by yeah, of course. I don't think that it's really so important. I see the disadvantage much higher, and of course, I'm all in favor of currency competition, for example, private issuers of currencies. The competition would then ensure the stability, the stable currencies would be issued. For example, then finally the gold standard for Europe would be fantastic. But if you have a euro that has this incentives, I think it's worse than what we had before, a system where the Bundesbank could control implicitly the policy of the other countries that were attached to the European still monetary system. One thing is, if they really wanted to introduce, they really wanted to have the Bundesbank or a stable currency, then they should just have introduced currency freedom in Europe, or just introduce the D-mark in the rest of the countries. But they did. And we see now that the Bundesbank are leading already the feeding ship. Like Axel Weber, who was supposedly the next president of the Bundesbank, said, or realized that he was in a minority with his views and left. And the chief economist, Jürgen also left because he was in a minority. They just saw that when it came to voting, he and his allies had the majority. And one thing is the economic government or fiscal government that could be introduced. They will probably tell the same story. They will say, oh, now, like with the euro, we will introduce ECB that is modeled after the Bundesbank, and it will be good for everyone. And they will say, we will do an economic government, and then we get the German austerity and rational government for everyone. And then when it comes to voting, we see the same in ECB. Oh, we are the minority, the Germans and the Dutch, and the others and the majority. So the long-term prospects of this centralization are very negative. It might be less negative than being independent, but at least if you have the ability, can choose your fate.
But the minority-majority decision is undemocratic anyway. Do we have a better alternative?
Yeah, of course, the gold standard.
I would like to comment also on this topic. First of all, my question would be, do we have a say in this when we here around the table, in the sense that we have certain mechanisms in place, and once a country applies to join the European Union, part of the deal is that at a further moment they will adopt the euro. So what we can do is eventually to maybe act for changing the treaties, but otherwise this is purely let's say, a hypothetical discussion. This is one issue. The second issue is, according to the current rules of the game, Romania has no chance whatsoever to join the euro under the current and medium-term or even long-term economic indicators. So, if we want to, we cannot, and if we cannot, anyway, is not a subject. Anyway, Romania might join the euro, but only on a political basis, which goes back to the idea that the whole construction, in fact, is political. I mean, even for joining the European Union, Romania was not prepared, as being at about 25% of the average GDP, so it was not really prepared to join. It was accepted for political reasons, and as we feel, let's say, all the discussions, and even those tomorrow, we are expecting some discussions. I don't expect tremendous developments tomorrow. Probably a new term for another meeting, but anyway, probably the sort of solution will be a political one and will lead to what you mentioned, centralization of a higher level. So if you want a replacement of the national state with a European state whatsoever. So it's a comment, but again, I don't feel that we have either on a technical way, meaning the rules, or what is called the real economy basis, meaning the level of development of the economy. We don't have a say in that. We want it or we don't want it. We may want it, we cannot join it. If it's decided politically by those who can, the slogan of Obama, yes we can. So if they can, probably they will do it. Then, and another issue is what happens when in the economy you have the majority of the economy owned by foreign companies. So in that case, the majority of production is obtained with foreign-owned companies and what you are defending. In fact, you don't have your own industry anymore, or services or whatever. So what would be the use of having your own currency? I'm just in the middle. I'm not saying let's have it or not have it. I just raised a number of issues to be added in the analysis.
I was wondering if you could give me a perspective on, from a political perspective, that we're seeing in Western Europe, predominantly as coupled with the decline of the Eurozone and rise in immigration. We're seeing that you have a rise, a sort of reemergence of nationalism in Europe with the Front National in France and the FPÖ in Austria, and then the DFP in Denmark and so forth. I was wondering if you could comment on what your thoughts were on the potential rise of this sort of political and economic nationalism that could have an effect on the future of the Eurozone. Because they're all pretty much Eurosceptic, so in some way or another.
Okay, let me first respond to you. I can see with the point that you could not join anyway. Of course, I'm all in favor that you fulfill the criteria, reduce the deficit and so on, eliminate it, reduce the size. Of course, then according to the treaties, you have to join, as you said. So you have no choice. Well, the solution that I propose is do what the Greeks did, but in the opposite way. That is, eliminate the deficit and then falsify your statistics and report a higher deficit. So that's the obvious solution that I see inspired by the Greeks. So the question of nationalism, yeah, obviously we see this movement. Funny thing is that in the key country in Germany, there's no one really in the media or in the political parties that proposes an alternative to going forward with this political project. So it looks like that new parties would be needed to change this. This takes time, maybe 2, 3, or 5, 4 years. There may be a new party, and then the established parties will get some big problems because I think that the majority of the population is very discontent with the external policies in Germany. So then the second scenario there becomes more realistic. Yes.
Do you think the guys who made the euro, this project, I think they knew what would happen. The bankruptcies, the national bankruptcies, what they wanted to. Because if you bring somebody to bankruptcy, it allows you more power over that, to extract the political power, to take it in your hands from that. Do you think they knew what would happen?
I don't know. Many said that we need a political union, and or Emerson thought that, or admitted that a monetary union without a political union would not be possible. I don't think that they really understand in detail how the monetary mechanism works. But I think they had a vague idea that doing the monetary union would unleash pressures to go forward with the political union. Yes, that I think. they are happy to take this risk to go down.
So I think they consciously wanted to bankrupt them in order to blackmail them. Yeah, accept this rule, or I won't give you any money to save your
I don't know, maybe.
You know, this is an interesting theory by Professor Pilsman, the centralization theory. You know, bankrupt so you can concentrate power.
Yeah, this is what happens. But I'm not sure if it's really like a master plan.
So it's not a conspiracy.
so this is kind of skeptical. More like a spontaneous result of the incentives and the main understanding of the process, I would say.
Would then like Rothbard at this point assume rationality? I mean, if you have a really simple tragedy of the commons mechanism that was really understandable, and if you assume rationality, are you not in a sense forced to assume that it was deliberate? I mean, going to an unintended consequence of human action doesn't shift really the paradigm away from rationality.
Yeah. I doubt really in the intelligence of monetary understanding of many politicians. That is the reason. As I said, probably they had an understanding that there would be a pressure, and without putting it in terms of the tragedy of the commons, understanding how the collateral thing works, maybe some specialists knew it, but the decision makers like Kohl and Diderot, I think they had the idea that somehow if you do this unification and monetary things, then this will only work in the long run with political unification. And this actually they said, they on record were saying this. And so in this sense they did it rationally and deliberately, I think, without probably understanding the mechanism.
If I may intervene just a second, joining somehow the two previous comments, in politics there is a well-known and ancient principle of creating a problem for which you offer the solution afterwards. And it's simply unimaginable if we speak about the so-called crisis of today, that thousands of people in the big banks with very high PhD in mathematics and so on wouldn't be able in the past 10 years to figure out that if you increase and increase and increase, that bubble will one day create a crisis. So speaking about the euro, now we with inverted commas, we discover that this project cannot function without fiscal union. And the fiscal union is key to concentrating the power or moving it from a national to a, let's say, regional or anyway higher level. So at least we can think about a master plan. So it's not an accident, we are on course. Yes.
Your point is based mainly on a political perspective on the process of euro building. You contrast a libertarian vision with a socialist vision, and you build your argument on that kind of contrast. But it's less clear what, from an economic point of view, what are the arguments, because from an economic point of view, there are many arguments in favor of a bigger market, in favor of a common currency. You know very well that having many currencies means having a high transaction cost for the economy. Someone was, a few years ago, there was a famous writer, English writer, who made a calculation that he left England with £100 and after going through several countries, he was left with 50 without buying anything, just by the exchange rate. So it is a very significant transaction cost, which is related to having many currencies. And this is not a question which is answered by your critique. And then, in many cases, in many ways, I believe that there are many critics against the euro now, which are not just and fair, because in many ways it is like we had a big party last night, we had a good time, but the next day we have to decide who pays for the broken windows. And this is exactly what happens with the euro, because for 10 years, more than 10 years, everyone has a good party. Southern countries had very low interest rates. They enjoyed an economic boom. Northern countries like Germany, they also had advantages because they were very competitive in exporting. Because of the exchange rate, euro was below the potential exchange rate for the mark. So everybody was enjoying in a way or another. It's difficult to decide who is paying for the broken windows, but it's not necessarily the fault of the euro. There are many mistakes which are made by the individual governments. And I don't believe that the Greek government outside the euro wouldn't be in the same position, because they started the same kind of imbalanced growth based on deficit, based on high inflation, based on even before the euro. So I'm not sure that it's always correct to blame the euro for what we've done.
Just for little moment. In the past, under the euro system, the individual countries cannot internalize the justice. Because this is the big problem. That's why the euro, Mr. Bagus told us about.
Yeah, this is different. Let me respond. Yeah, they probably would have done the same. The difference would have been that they could not have increased the standard of living in the way they did. They could not have accumulated so much debt without having higher inflation.
Greece has been bankrupt in the last 100 years, I
Yes.
believe, a great number of times, without the euro.
So the standard of living would have been lower. So it's obvious difference. The other comment you made was Germany profited. I tried to show that Germany actually did not profit so much because they had a weaker currency than they would have had. So with the D-Mark they would have had more wealth. They could have bought more in foreign countries. And as you saw, the retail sales consumption stagnated. Real wages actually didn't increase a lot. The result was just that the competitiveness increased in relation to the countries where the party was really going on. The first comment you made was on iron. I think this is a character that you go through all countries, changing your currency, and then you have half of it. What you do is if you trade this to one country, you just exchange it once. If you really wanted to eliminate this cost, well, there would have been other alternatives. Would have been introducing the D-Mark in all other EU countries. If you really wanted only this, then you could have had it. Or you could have introduced the alternative proposal was to make currency competition the set of legal tender, that any currency is legal tender in all other countries. So and then after the process of competition, maybe one or two currencies or three would have survived. This would have reduced this transaction cost. I mean, I'm all in favor for competition in currencies that then lead to the advantages of having a common reducing this cost. But I mean, you could say, well, then it's better to introduce a world currency with a world central bank. obviously you have no way to escape anymore the inflationary policies of this world central bank.
To go back to John's comment, isn't the fundamental fact that why the euro is to blame and why the eurozone is to blame for all this is that it's fundamentally a lie. It's a fiat currency, and the boom that Spain and the Mediterranean countries experienced was in fact false. It's not real. It's an artificial boom that's based off a fake currency that was essentially stolen, was made off wealth stolen from the Nordic countries and from the Low Countries in Germany. Essentially where all this wealth goes, and then now what we're experiencing is just a natural consequence. The lie has been exposed, and everything is now falling out because it's not based upon anything real. Whereas if you have like a real currency based off the gold standard, based in a real country, or a country that has a really developed economy, that's a sound currency, something that you can actually work with and develop real wealth with, not just debt in air. It's like moving air from one bag to another. It doesn't really mean if just because the bag gets bigger doesn't mean that you're actually doing anything with the bag because there's more air in the bag. So that would be, they said it was fair to say the euro is actually a fall because it's a lie.
Yeah, but coming back, let's take the case of Greece, coming back from euro to a local currency now issued by a central bank of Greece, it's the same. You are proposing to quit euro or not to join euro because there is a fiat money, but we are using also a fiat money, so it's not a problem. This is not an argument to say eurozone is not good. In both cases, if you are talking about a national currency or an over-national currency, both currencies are fiat money. So it's not an argument valid in this case. Maybe we should talk about how many how much money it is produced in euro area instead of a local area. I think that is the same. The competition is not on the way to reduce the quantity of money in the economy or to have a, let's say, to have an appropriate monetary policy, do not produce money. They are using money to, they compete with this production of money always in the same quantity because they gain, they think that they gain advantages for their exports, for their economy. But in fact, they are losing these advantages. So it's not an argument to say, okay, it's a fiat money, let's quit that. And also I want to say that it's quite complicated for Greece to quit now euro zone. Why? Because in this case, they will take all the costs on their own for all the faults they did. So it's not convenient to do this.
Well, that may be true, though, but at the same time, I mean, it's a multi-step process of getting towards the end goal, which is liberty. And fundamentally, with the UK outside of the Eurozone, they've been able to devalue and deregulate as they need to because the Eurozone is a one-size-fits-all policy that obviously doesn't work when you put Germany and Greece in the same currency community. So that's the idea that you have to sort of backtrack step by step. So eventually that we can get to the discussion of let's have a local currency that's based off real money. Because you're right, it's one fiat currency for another, which is one lie for another lie.
Just one comment, and I wonder if you agree that it is in fact an advantage that Greece would have to internalize the costs for the Greeks and for everyone. I mean, it's not fiat versus fiat, but it is fiat with the possibility of externalizing the costs, or so it would go in the way of responsibility for the Greeks. Would you agree with that? And maybe one question, because it seems to, what would, according to you, be the best, the optimal monetary policy for a country as Romania, assuming they would not go on the euro?
Of course, introduce our currency competition right away, or do a banking reform with 100% selling our assets by growth rate.
What would you say? Would you see alternative the best? What would be the best alternative?
The best,
And why?
Well, I would say the best. I think everyone will not to bail out banks again, but let them fail, and then have entrepreneurs compete, operate in the European market. But it's a little bit more, I think, using one it's still illusionary, but it's more realistic than letting the financial system collapse and then have good results by entrepreneurs and analysis. That might probably be good if we are
Also, you've presented the mainstream mechanism of increasing the money supply. I have a question regarding the recent measures of monetization, like ECB, SNB bond purchasing program or EFSF, because this look like more desperate measures in order to counter the debt deflation. Looks like a predicament with such a debt burden.
What is the question?
My question is, what is your opinion about these more direct measures of monetization, like the S&B program of ECB or the creation of EFSF?
Yeah, it looks like, in the essence, like it's the same, no? It doesn't matter so much if you set as collateral in your bond and then roll it over, and then the majors, and then they issue a new bond, or if you buy it, then rebuy it with majors. Or if you use an EFSF, so the EFSF gets guarantees from the countries, and they buy the Greek bonds, and of course these countries will pay the high rate because we finance themselves with the ECB. So at the end it's still the same, at the end it's still money production to save this irresponsible bankrupt governments, but it looks like it's more direct. It may also send a signal to markets that they really are serious in going on, and it seems to institutionalize and make it more transparent in the fiscal union step by step, and more difficult to undo. So once you have the euro bonds, which is then one step more from the EFSF, it's institutionalization of what has been done before, and more difficult to undo. That's my opinion. Yes?
Professor Bagus, let's suppose, for instance, that we are having this conversation not in Romania, but in Germany. We are German taxpayers here. And what kind of strategy for exit would you recommend? Exit with Eurozone?
As Germans.
As Germans, taxpayers.
Yes, again, we have the most ethical and best proposal, and we have the and less realistic. We have some more realistic one. I mean, for Germany, it would be relatively easy to exit without much harm. Obviously, if Greece would exit now without any accompanying reforms, it could bring misery on the country, because they would have to inflate to pay for the deficit, and then people, entrepreneurs and capital would leave the country, try to leave the country. For Germany, obviously, that would not be the case, because the markets would be expected, if they introduce a new fiat currency, a new D-mark, that it would be more stable, stronger than the euro. So I think if you want to leave the euro, it's key that markets expect your currency to be stronger than the rest of the euro. If you want to prevent an impoverishment of your currency, of your population by depreciation of your currency, and an exit of investors. So the easiest way for Germany would be, I would tell them, would be just to reintroduce the D-mark, like redenominate all claims into D-mark, exit the Euro system, the Bundesbank exits the Bundessystem, stops all this bailout fund, negotiates the bailout funds, and go from there on, because the best, and another solution would be introducing a gold standard. The best solution, in my opinion, would be from ethical standpoint to just eliminate all interventions in the monetary system, so bailing out, supporting guaranteeing banks that can collapse, and then have a new currency rise. But this will be more difficult to convince people than the first one, because they have already experienced the times with the big one.
But what about the French nuke bombs?
The French?
What about the French nuclear bombs?
Yeah, this is
This would be
maybe an important factor in the equation of I'm not sure how strong the pressure can really be. I mean, it's not really credible a threat of throwing nuclear in Germany. It has been. You would really try to convince your French population that this would be the best way. It would, you would have to portray Germans as very evil and for leaving. I don't think this would be possible.
I would have one comment and one question. The comment would be about the transaction costs that disappear when you go from a national currency to a euro. You lose those costs, but then you have the additional costs with extra central banking. So this is one argument. It's a very small and limited argument, but you have some other costs that appear when
you trigger the cost of the other central banking.
Well, as far as we know, we have central banks that are in place after the imposition of the euro, and you have also another. I'm sure you have swollen bureaucracy at the central banks, and those are costs that appear. That is one limited argument. And a question I had for Philipp is, there is this discussion about okay, the Greeks, for example, have squandered a lot of benefit from this redistribution predicated on the euro, and now the Germans have this sort of claim. They say, give us one island more. What do you think about this? What is the ethical position regarding this? I mean, the past debt that is incurred by Greece. Or with what? Or should it pay or not?
No. It should pay. The government should repudiate all debts. All debts as any government would do. In my opinion, the only people you could make responsible are government officials for robbing their own population, but also for indirectly robbing German population. But you shouldn't tax hardworking Greek people to pay back the Greek government debts that are owned anyway by privileged German banks that have many legal privileges.